Assalamu alaikum and welcome to what has now become our customary wrap-up, post-mortem or takeaways from the Iftar Insights series. We did this in 2019 after we visited 28 masjids and featured one corporate iftar, and inshallah today we'd like to do the same because it is, we feel, an essential exercise in ensuring that the lessons learned are reiterated and or said for the first time to those who may have missed the episodes where certain lessons were learned, number one. And number two, it is also a golden opportunity as well for us to combine our collective or utilize our collective experiences over the month and over the many masjids that we would have visited to provide some maybe new wisdom or insights moving forward as to how we can improve our Ramadan, our deen, and everything else associated with both in the coming days, weeks, months, and years ahead, inshallah. So that being said, let's get right into it. This year, 2021, we were able to visit 16 locations, and I have to say locations because they weren't only masjids, they were a mall, they were a food court and foundation, they were a migrant center, so there were so many different places outside of just a core typical masjid that we visited this year, and they really provided us with some new insights. So count them down. There are 10 points that we really want to share, 10 takeaway points that we want to share with you as firstly a reminder to ourselves, and thereafter as a reminder to all other Muslims across Trinidad and Tobago, and even those who are not Muslim who may be able to walk away with some value from this as well. So at number one on our list, sometimes you just need to start. This was a lesson we learned at the Masjid in Curep when the brother that we interviewed, Uncle was telling us, Uncle Afzal was telling us about the fact that this masjid was built, this new structure was built upon the foundation of the old one. And we went into a deeper discussion to talk about the fact that when those first brothers would have put down the foundation for that older structure, never in their wildest imaginations would they have fathomed that that structure would then be the base support for something that is now so grandiose and something that is now so majestic and magnificent. And we also learned this lesson in other communities, like for instance Laventil. Sometimes you just need to start. You don't have to necessarily see things through until its completion. You just need to plant a seed. The brothers in Laventil credited the brothers from Gasparilla and Marabella, the Ghani family in particular, with having brought Islam or the message of Islam to their community decades ago. And the Ghani brothers, the Ghani family, was not able to construct a masjid in the Laventil community, or at least in Rock City at that time, but the message stayed. The message had time to infiltrate, to penetrate, and to really grow and to simmer and to marinate with the people of the community and to be adopted and practiced by the people of the community. And now they themselves are constructing the masjid, and whilst the masjid is being constructed, they are praying under a tent and inspiring Muslims all around Trinidad and Tobago and the wider world who would have looked on at that episode. So the first reminder is sometimes you just really need to start. Allah does not always require that you finish something, but if you have the capacity or the ability to be able to start the initiative, even if that is all that you do, that is one thing less for someone else or maybe even some other generation to pick up on or to start from, right? So our second point is bloom where you are planted, and my mind must go now to Masjid al-Furqan in Felicity. Felicity, as the Imam mentioned, is a community of about 10,000 plus Hindus and 300 Muslims, and yet still a masjid has been able to be constructed there, despite the fact that the immediate vicinity of that area has so many masjids. On the southern side there is St. Thomas Masjid, and on the northern side there are so many masjids in the Charleville area. I think the closest is the Asja Institute, and thereafter all the masjids on the Charleville stretch. But a masjid was missing for that area, and the Imam went on to share something with us to let us know that he was not always Muslim. He was a Hindu, and Allah works in mysterious ways, and maybe, just maybe, That was what was required. Because the Imam did mention in that interview that no other Muslim would have been able or was able up until that point to lead or to organize or coordinate the construction of that masjid. But him being Hindu initially, before reverting to Islam, that allowed him certain insights and certain connections with the wider community around him that enabled him to be able to lead that effort toward the construction of the masjid. And alhamdulillah, he has been the imam of that masjid for well over 2 decades now. So sometimes you have to bloom where you are planted. And in this community of 10,000 Hindus and 300 Muslims, this is also the community where one of the premier Muslim funeral agencies or funeral homes in the form of MFS, Muslim Funeral Services, also exists as well. So they are providing Muslim services for all of Trinidad and Tobago for the most part, and they're based in an area that is not predominantly Muslim. And those brothers were very, very, very gracious and filled with gratitude for the rest of the community that's not Muslim, because they mentioned the fact that they continue, because of the way that they live as Muslims, they continue to be supported by the community of 10,000 Hindus who obviously aren't themselves Muslims, but who, they're all able to live with harmoniously and with great cohesion and support for and from one another, which is the way that it is supposed to be, and which is something that we in Trinidad and Tobago should never take for granted. So bloom where you are planted. Wherever you are planted, bloom right there. All right, that's our second point. The third point that we wanted to make is one concerning dawah, and the rest are very quick points really. Ramadan is the month of the Quran, but for many of us there is the misconception that it is also a month of seclusion. We need to do away with the work. We need to try to do as little work and try to focus on as many little, try to distract ourselves, or get away from, I should say, as many distractions as is possible. And the entirety of the month should be spent in worship, in the masjid, etc. And then we met with the brothers of the Caribbean Dawah Association, and they gave us a completely different spin. They spent hours and then almost the entire day one Saturday at the Gulf City Mall, and their take on it was this: if Ramadan is indeed the month of the Quran, which we know that it is, then wouldn't it be best to use this month and this time to remind people about the Quran, or even more so, to invite people to read the Quran, especially those who have never read it before? They're not trying to convert people, they're just trying to give the message. And they said to us, what better month, brother? What better month to tell people and to call people toward the word of Allah, toward the Quran, rather than this month? So they chose not to spend their time in the masjid on that day. It doesn't mean that they're not going to do it, but it's a reminder that there must be balance in all things. Even in this month of Ramadan, there must be balance. And a lot of Muslims walk away sometimes feeling guilty because they still have an 8 to 4 job, or they still have to work, and you feel guilty that you're not getting the time that others are fortunate to have to be spending that time in ibadah. And the brothers reminded us again that this is not something to feel guilty of. Allah is aware of our lot, our situation, our circumstances, and He doesn't require that we quit the job in order to be able to worship Him, but rather whilst working, remember Him, offer dhikr, whilst on the commute, and just do the best that you can with the situation and the circumstances that you have to work with. That is all that is required. So there is no need to think that you have to quit your job, or that you have to clear your schedule for the entirety of the month to be able to spend the month in seclusion, or the month is only to be utilized in the masjid. There are so many other ways that we could worship Allah, from dawah to spreading the word of the Quran to inviting people to Islam, or just by being the best example and letting others see and attest to the faith by just our example alone, inshallah. So that's our third point. Our fourth is the fact that we must use this opportunity to remind ourselves firstly, and thereafter every other Muslim looking on, especially Muslims in Trinidad and Tobago, that when we speak of the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we talk about the ummah, but how many of us have forgotten that that ummah goes beyond borders, beyond nationality, and beyond languages. Now, we may remember that. We may say, well, no, I've always known this altogether. And when we think of beyond borders, you might think of the people in Palestine and in Pakistan and all of these other far removed places. But the ummah also consists of those Muslim brothers and sisters who are migrants from Venezuela, and those Muslim brothers and sisters who are migrants from other Spanish-speaking countries. There is Islamophobia all around the world, but in Trinidad and Tobago, I'm not sure what is the correct terminology for it, but we do have some phobia, some stereotypes, and a lot of negativity surrounding the issue of migrants. And this is, again, not a political issue, but viewed strictly from a humanitarian and Islamic perspective. What of the Muslims of Venezuela? Have you ever thought about that? What can we do to help the Muslims of Venezuela? What can we do to inform the Venezuelans who are not Muslim, the migrants who are not Muslim, who are coming to Trinidad and Tobago? What have we done? Outside of criticize them and criticize the government for them being here, what have we done to invite them to the path of Allah? What have we done to inform them about the faith, to give them dawah? Because if all we do is sit in the background and be keyboard warriors and criticize and bash and blaspheme, do you really think that that is in keeping with the concept of the one ummah of Islam that Islam promotes, and that is a core ideology and belief within the tenets of Islam, within the faith? So we got that wonderful reminder from the brothers of the Caribbean, brothers and sisters, I should say, really, of the Caribbean Dawah Association, and we thank them for it. It was firstly a reminder to ourselves, and this, me mentioning it, is again still a reminder to ourselves first, before it is in any way at all a reminder or information to you. Our fifth point concerns that of community, and it really was very heartwarming to see that the pandemic has caused so many masjids to return to their true purpose, which is to not only serve as a place of worship and a place of knowledge on Islamic matters, but as the center of the community. And if you walk away with nothing else from this contribution, this synopsis really, I really hope that you and your Jamaat can walk away with this one point. Your masjid must return to being the center of the community. If it is not presently, brother and sister, please do the best that you can to ensure that it can return this way, because this is what it should have always been. Maybe you've never heard the concept before, maybe you never knew this before, maybe you always thought the masjid was only the place of prayer and of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the masjid has always been, and you can check the theory, you can check the examples, you can check with the scholars, and they will all tell you that the masjid should always be the center of the community. And this is not the center of the Muslim community, mind you. This is the center of the community. And one of the good things that has come from the pandemic is that it has forced many masjids, forced in some instances and reminded in others, many masjids, that they have a duty towards community. So whether that meant that these masjids are now pick-up points for food for iftar, or they are pick-up points and or distribution points, or headquarters for operations for food distribution, hampers helping the poor, clothes sorting, packaging, distribution, so many masjids, Makun Street Masjid in San Fernando, they were collecting items to put into hampers to distribute to the community, Muslim and non-Muslim, just the community around them. We had so many other reminders as well. One of the best reminders came from Masjid Muttaqeen, I believe it is, an Islamic center in Freeport, that's in Calcutta, in Freeport. Their masjid offers arbitration services, mediation, counseling on matters and in marriage. Every single service that we need, as people, as human beings living in society, that masjid offers. They teach trade. It's registered as a trade school for that matter. So they are teaching you right now air conditioning, refrigeration, and a couple other things I can't remember offhand that they think are relevant and that could help the brothers and sisters to learn a trade or a vocation, and so thereafter become employable or be able to earn an income for themselves and their family. So it's not they're not just giving charity as in giving you a fish to feed you for a day, but they're teaching you to fish via the trades that they're teaching and the vocations that they're teaching, so that you can in turn take care of yourself. And that in itself is going beyond just the regular sadaqah, the regular charity, but into a point of perpetual charity, of sadaqatul jariyah, the charity that keeps on giving, inshallah, because you're not just giving that one-off charity, but you're giving a charity that they could thereafter use continuously, and that will be of benefit to them and their family and the community for as long as they live, inshallah. So I am very heartened by the fact that so many masjids have returned to the system where they are encouraging others to be the center of the community. Alhamdulillah, the masjid in Arangwes is only just being built. Construction is still ongoing, and having spoken to Brother Abdul Rahman at that masjid, they already have engaged with the community, Muslim or not Muslim, non-Muslim. They have engaged with the community, and they continue to do so, and they have plans for the community. And the community includes everybody, Muslim or not non-Muslim, because they understand that this is the purpose of the masjid. And think about it, you're giving dawah without ever having to tell people about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or Prophet Muhammad upon whom be peace, just by your example, just by the way that you live, and just by the way that you're interacting and interfacing with everyone. That in itself is probably the best dawah that we can ever give. So a reminder to all imams, to all masjid executives, to all Muslims altogether, the masjid must return to the point where it is the center of the community. And on that note, that leads me into point 6 of 10, which is that of education. I touched on it at the masjid there in Freeport, but it was very, again, heartwarming to see that so many masjids, they've not yet necessarily reached the point where they're serving the community in so many ways, but at least they've expanded beyond being a place of prayer only, and they're now places of education as well, Islamic and secular, and not just delving into it or dabbling their hands into it, but leading as well. When we had the opportunity to visit with Masjid al-Huda in Marabella and tour their facilities, and thereafter get to understand their reputation with the ECCE, that's the Early Childhood Care and Education Institute or organization or body, they are one of the premier early childhood education centers in the country. Their facilities are second to none. Their standards are that high, and it's a place where, as a Muslim, you'll feel proud to attend, not just because it is a place that inculcates Muslim values, but it is a place that is seeking academic and Islamic excellence simultaneously. So it's not that it's leaning towards Islamic education and they're giving you a little bit of secular. It is that both are on par. And as we were reminded in that conversation with the brothers at Masjid al-Huda, that as a Muslim, we do everything properly. And as Brother Amo had said, Brother Amjad had said, if we can't do it properly, we're not doing it at all. If we can't do it and excel at it, we're not doing it at all, because these are also the hallmarks of a Muslim. We do things properly. We never do things halfway or vice. This is part of the Muslim culture and of the Muslim framework. So education was something that we were delighted to see is back on the agenda and is back as a priority at so many masjids, and kudos to those masjids who never took it off the table altogether, for that matter. Alhamdulillah. Our 7th point is very simply this. So we have learned from 2019 and again in 2021 that Muslim culture and the Muslim identity in Trinidad and Tobago is very rich. We have a very rich Muslim history, and not just our identity, but even our infrastructure, even the masjids, right? They all come with such rich history. And the one favor that I would like to ask is that we start recording these histories. I urge all imams, I urge everyone associated with any masjid in this country to petition those masjids, those jamaats, that leadership, to record the history of that masjid. We have taken it for granted for far too long that we know the history of the masjid because we were present when the foundation was laid, we were present, or maybe our parents were, or our grandparents were. And so because it's in our heads, we assume that it is common knowledge. But how many of that, how much of that is lost to the generations either presently or the ones that are coming up? Think about 20 years from now, inshallah, one generation from now, 20 years from now, would that generation know the history of this masjid? Where is it recorded? And we need to do better than just hand-me-down stories because there's so much technology easily available to us. So whether you want to write it, record it, do voice notes and keep that, however you choose to record the history of the masjid, maybe interview all the brothers and sisters who were involved in the process from decision making to who donated the land to how the things were laid down and who designed and who built and who labored and who contributed, and sometimes the history goes beyond just the physical, sometimes the history is national, interwoven in our national history as well, like when we visited Bish and a couple other masjids as well that where we're in a situation right now where we're not sure which is the oldest masjid in the country. There are a couple masjids who lay claim to that title, and we were talking to the brothers and sisters in Bish, and the idea moving forward is that we should ideally maybe get in touch with the National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago, and I think they're working on this. I'm not sure if it's active or just a passive idea, but we will reach back out to them again to discuss it. But reach out to the relevant authorities to see if they could assist us in compiling and storing and archiving this history as well, because the Muslim identity is a major part of the fabric of Trinidad and Tobago. We're almost 10% of the population, so that is a substantial percentage and contribution, and with roughly about 152, 53 masjids and musallahs and counting, that history is undeniable. And that leads me into point eight, which is exactly that point, that of the Muslim contribution. The Muslim contribution in Trinidad and Tobago is undeniable, and as a Muslim, being able to unearth all of the information that we have been able to thus far with the series in both 2019 and 2021, a total of 45 visits so far, 29 by 16. We have realized that you do have reason to feel proud as a Muslim in Trinidad and Tobago. We have contributed in so many ways to the history, the fabric, the culture, the identity, the moral and ethical makeup of this country. We've contributed so much to it. Going to Macoon Street and finding out about late President, His Excellency Nur Hassan Ali, and his contributions and his family's contributions to that masjid, and of course to the country as president as well. So as president, he would have served this country, and his service would have come highly influenced or defined by his Muslim values. And there are so many other examples of Muslims. Our dear and esteemed Maulana Shiraz this year was sworn in as a senator in the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and these are all people who are going to steer the country in whichever direction, but guided by the principles, tenets, and beliefs of Islam. So the Muslim contribution is undeniable. And then when we find out this year about the hospital that Brother Inshan and the Baraka Foundation are seeking to construct, the sod has already been turned. A hospital, a Muslim hospital, a hospital run on Muslim values that will be open to the public. So we're not just serving Muslims. And then you get wind of all of these other masjids that are being constructed to serve communities that have not yet been served, or in communities where Islam has not yet reached. So we take it for granted that, okay, there is a masjid in Grandi, but do you know how vast Sangre Grandi is? So it makes sense that you go into every nook and cranny and find out which communities are not served or underserved. And our brothers and sisters at the Rashadi Foundation are doing that and continue to do that with the Latin American Center, and thereafter at Sangre Grande, and in previous years in Cumana and Sanssouci and Valencia and so many other places. So the Muslim contribution to Trinidad and Tobago is undeniable, and you do have reason as Muslim to be proud of our contribution towards this country. And our final 2 points at number 9 really aren't takeaways per se, but just sentiments. And I noticed with with great affection and a lot of since the words escape me right now, I'll just say very positive feelings. The contentment that a Muslim community really has. It's not equal across the board, and that is clearly visible, even just to the naked, unobservant eye. But the contentment. Going into Laventille and seeing these brothers praying under a tent, and there is no regret. There is no desire. I mean, there is ultimately a desire to be able to pray in the masjid, but there is no desire in the moment for something better, because they are content that they have accepted Islam. They are content with their faith in this deen, and content to just be able to pray underneath a tent and not get wet. And if they get wet, no problem, because they're just content to still be able to pray in Jamaat, which wasn't possible in previous years. And that level of contentment goes hand in hand with an unspoken level of faith. And that is something that is not just heartwarming, but that is so inspiring as well. And that contentment is something that I hope, pray, and wish for each and every one of us, not just Muslim, but each and every one of us in Trinidad and Tobago. That is hashtag life goals, really. And our final point is one of gratitude. Not just our gratitude for your continued support, views, likes, shares, comments, feedback, guidance, etc. with regard to this series, but just the general gratitude that we were able to be a part of, that movement of gratitude, that aura of gratitude that we were able to be a part of visiting the masjids. It took COVID and a complete ban on worship in public spaces and at the masjids in 2020 for us to be able to really deeply, in a way that was never possible before, because in Trinidad and Tobago we probably take it for granted that we have this freedom of practice and freedom of religion, but having been denied the opportunity to pray collectively in Jamaat in 2020, there's so much gratitude at all the masjids that we visited for the opportunity, even with restrictions, to be able to visit the masjid, to pray in congregation, to meet brothers and sisters. And even though you couldn't shake hands, you couldn't do or interact in the way that we would have in the past, there was such gratitude this year. And the most common phrase this year, I think we've said and heard, remains Alhamdulillah. Everyone is just, those words just, COVID just caused those words to fall out of your mouth. It caused this feeling to emanate out of you so much freely, so much, just so much more freely than ever before. And we had the ability to pray together for 16 days before the latest tranche of lockdowns. And even with the lockdowns now, with the allowance of 5 people to be in the masjid, we are still grateful. So we're praying at home, but we're still grateful that our communities can be safeguarded, because with 5 people allowed in the masjid for live streaming and other purposes, right, it then means that in each masjid there is the possibility that at least one brother or 2 could be in itikaf, and save the community, because as Muslim, the rules, right? As a community, we need to have somebody in the itikaf to safeguard the community. I can't remember the Arabic term for it, but so even with the latest tranche of restrictions, there is still gratitude, and we cannot be tone deaf and end without acknowledging the elephant around the world. And that is the elephant that is COVID-19, the pandemic, and in particular in Trinidad and Tobago, this next wave. I'm not sure if we're on 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th, but this next wave that we're undergoing here in Trinidad and Tobago, and must mention the fact that we are grateful and should be grateful for life, for health, for strength, for ability, for sustenance, for continued guidance. And we pray and must continue to pray for those who have been affected so severely. Those who are ailing presently, our hospitals are almost at 100% capacity, almost all of them. Those who are ailing, we pray that we do not get to the point where we go beyond capacity and where someone else gets ill and a bed and the necessary equipment is not available. We've gotten word of entire families, 2 and 3 people in one family succumbing to COVID-19. And it is against all of this backdrop that as Muslims, we should continue to be grateful. Grateful for our ability to continue to practice, to fast, to pray, and to observe safely. And Allah has made all of these provisions for us. How many of us appreciated the faith even more when we found out that, yes, Islam as a way of life did have a precedent. There was a precedent, is a precedent, right, for pandemics in the faith and how we as Muslims should respond. And that we didn't just have the theory of how we should respond, but the practicum of how we should respond in terms of the way the azan is adjusted and the way the salah is adjusted and so on and so forth. So above all else, I think from 2020 into 2021, the overriding message really is one of gratitude. And whatever else you are grateful for or can add to the list, we would like to end off on a note of gratitude as well, to say thank you once again for your continued support and well wishes and your hospitality and your open arms and your encouragement as well throughout the month of Ramadan. Our goal, as we've mentioned to you, is to be able to archive and chronicle for history in perpetuity this snapshot in time of Islam in the present day, and to be able to visit all of the masjids, inshallah, across Trinidad and Tobago as well. So we hope to be able to achieve this. Initially was over a 5-year period. We started in 2019, nothing was able to happen in 2020, and we're cut short halfway through 2020, and Allah knows best. Nothing is but by His will and but by His permission. So the intention is there, inshallah, and however that is able and whenever that is able to manifest itself, that will all be Allah permitting, inshallah. So we hope that you will continue to join us and support us on this journey, and inshallah we look forward to 2022. Eid Mubarak in advance from myself, from Asma, from Brother Rojan, from Tevon, from Sister Maryam, and the entire team here at Fuzz Events and Entertainment Limited, and our partners across at Impression Studio TT as well. So do enjoy, make the best of it. Most importantly, stay safe, and Assalamu alaikum.